Brexit news. Germany's Weber says EU should have pressured UK from outset to avoid crisis. Outspoken German politician and EU parliamentary candidate Manfred Weber today claimed the EU should have been tougher on Britain and demanded a complete Brexit withdrawal plan from the outset. He blasted the bloc for not applying enough pressure on the UK at an earlier stage over its terms of exit, criticising negotiators for not thrashing out a deal before triggering Article 50 and avoiding the UK's current Brexit crisis management. Christian Social Union (CSU) member Mr. Weber, a Bavarian sister party of Angela S. Merkel ruling Christian Democratic Union (CDU) party, claimed the UK hasn't said what they want during lengthy Brexit negotiations. The German politician kicked off his European Parliament election campaign last week, a bid to replace the job of Jean-Claude Juncker, with a trip to Cyprus, as part of a whistle-stop tour of Europe, and did not hold back with his views on the current Brexit deadlock gripping the UK. But he criticised the EU for not demanding the UK have its withdrawal plan set in stone at an earlier stage, seemingly laying blame at the feet of negotiators for not being firmer with Britain. Mr. Weber said that after a 2.5-year negotiation period, Mrs. May's contested withdrawal agreement was only a contract for the 29th of March, one to avoid chaos. Mr. Weber told Politico, looking back, perhaps the mistake we, as EU 27 made, was that we never forced the British to tell us what kind of future relationship they wanted. If we had demanded this more decisively, perhaps the British would have showed their colours. It echoes thoughts of Brexiteers and Remainers alike in the UK, who in hindsight says the government should have had a more concrete exit plan before triggering Article 50 and setting the process of exiting the EU in motion. But Mr. Weber said he hoped that Mrs. May would not be voted down when she returns to the Commons for her meaningful vote on Tuesday, saying a voting down of the deal would turn the UK's Brexit ambitions into crisis management. Mr. Weber said, if Miss May is defeated in the Commons, as seems to be the most likely scenario, we are going to be back in the classic Brexit mode, a crisis management mode trying to hastily hush up to solve problems. I cannot imagine the UK will participate in the next European election. The German politician stated the UK had a responsibility to make sure it reached its deadline to leave the EU bloc. It follows claims that a Brexit extension is likely, even if the withdrawal agreement is voted up by MPs on Tuesday. Mr. Weber said, it is impossible to explain to the citizens that a country leaving the EU will take part in the European elections and be represented in the European Parliament for the next 5 years. That is why it must be clear that time is running out. It is weeks or less. The British now have a huge responsibility. Mrs. May faces the biggest day of her premiership on Tuesday when the Commons votes on her withdrawal agreement, after an initial vote was delayed last year. The Prime Minister received a blow last week when 17 rebel Tory MPs helped to pass an amendment tabled by backbencher Dominic Grieve that would force Mrs. May to come up with an alternative plan in just 3 days if her agreement is voted down by MPs. The Prime Minister has also faced increased pressure to give a firm date of when she would step down as leader. Mrs. May has insisted she will step down after the UK leaves the bloc on March 29.